It's Tuesday, February 21st, 2023. It's the eve of the latest Class 3 kill storm that's going to hit Michigan tomorrow. But before Armageddon hits, Greg and I are going to have, talk about Detroit sports on the Knee Jerks Detroit Sports Talk, if you know, and Big Al. I'm the Big Al of the equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, as always, my co-host, my co-conspirator, Greg Eno of the Out of Bounds blog. Greg, are you ready to load up on milk and toilet paper and bread? And I don't know in what order, but
well, it looks you and I look, we were kidding before the show. You and I, our faces look like we've been hunkered down for weeks here with the lack of shaving.
We both have copious amounts of facial hair. So because I haven't shaved since I got back from the cabin a couple of weeks ago, and Greg is just looking like a guy who works from home. So
well, yeah, that's true. You don't know what you don't want to know what I'm wearing below the waist either. But that's another story.
Oh yeah, maybe that should be our birthday game. What's Greg wearing?
Oh no, it shouldn't be. That shouldn't be our birthday game. I am Greg Eno for my WordPress Out of Bounds blog. You can follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks, of course.
A loincloth.
No. Stop it. We're joined tonight by our good friend Bob Page. We're going to bring Bob back to the show.
Yes.
He's got a number of takes on a number of different subjects.
The always opinionated Bob Page.
We always like to, rapid fire with him, and so we're going to do that lightning round with him in a little bit. But and we've got all the Detroit sports teams on the docket tonight to talk about. But before we get to any of that, we're going to play a game we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro? Everybody knows how we play this game by now. I give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues, who win some free fries at Red Barn. Free fries.
The Red Barn. Oh, my goodness. Boy, that's you have to be really old to get a Red Barn reference.
This person, Al, made his name in the world of baseball. He was born on this date in 1958. He's 65 years old today. He's in the Hall of Fame. I will say that. He played 20 years with one team. I will tell you that. And he's currently still in the game, albeit not as a coach or as a broadcaster, but he still touches the game in his own way. And I will kind of leave it there. I'll leave it there.
All right, baseball, Hall of Fame, 20 years, same team, 65 years old. Huh. Well, you must be trying to leave this kind. I was going to say Zubas, but we're not going in that direction. So, God, same team. Okay, so we would have retired in the early 90s. Huh. It's been this entire. Oh God, I'm going to pass right now. That's okay. You're keeping it vague for a reason. I can tell here.
Yeah, I am. You'll understand why. You'll understand why.
All right. So with that, Greg, as we'll get to the birthday game. We'll get back to the birthday game after we talk to Bob Page. Want to get up the always awesome introduction to one of our favorite guests on this podcast.
Yeah, we did. We talked to Bob in a pre-recorded interview, and let's play that for you right now.
As always, he threw you a curveball at the end there. Yeah, I think you were expecting him to go a little different with the Super Bowl question.
I thought he was going to jump on the official. I forgot. He's a former umpire, so he kind of sides with the.
And he made a great point about baseball umpires and it being kind of a sucky job when it comes because of the travel.
Yeah.
And he's right. Yeah. Those guys probably don't get paid enough for all the crap they got to put up with.
And I wonder how much they do get paid. You never really know about official salary. Maybe it's probably, I guess it's
six figures, but it's not high six figures. I'd probably bet you that right now. You know?
No, it is a long haul that's true. I don't know.
Yeah, but I'll be honest with you, I kind of fell on Bob's side of the equation when it came to how the game ended, and that it was. I hate seeing them swallow whistles. If it called, it was a penalty. It was a ticky tack, but it was a legit call because he did grab him. You could see the jersey tug, and the defensive back admitted it. So, I don't know. I've always kind of been old school about this, Greg, where where you can't let officials decide the game, but that also means officials have to change how they call the game for the first 90% of it, and then they have to change how they call the game in the last 10% of it. And I've never agreed with that.
You know what? I appreciate that. I really do appreciate that opinion. But you know what's funny about that though is that for the NHL, for as long as I've ever watched the NHL, those officials, excuse me, those officials in a playoff game in overtime.
Yeah.
And a playoff game will absolutely swallow the whistle.
They definitely do.
To mug a guy to get a power play in a playoff overtime. So there is that does go on. I mean, you can't
you're right.
that the NHL calls a game the same way in overtime as they do. They don't. They don't.
Yeah, so that means they call the game differently. You probably are going to they call the game differently from the regular season to the playoffs as well.
Right, but you know what though? But that's known though that everybody knows that going in.
Right.
Once that whistle blows, that horn goes at the end of regulation, both teams know that they're not going to call unless it's blatant. They're not going to call a penalty in overtime. They're just not going to do it. Now, part of that is interesting because a lot of players, of course, the longer the game goes on, the more tired they are, and you're more likely to resort to things like hooking and tripping a guy to stop him because you're tired. But unless you just completely jump on a guy and take him down like a wrestling move, they're not going to call anything. They're just not going to do it because they're scared to death of a team winning a playoff game in overtime on a power play.
Yeah.
And I kind of get that. But at least in that scenario, everybody in the building knows that that's the way the game's going to be called. So I mean, so it's kind of maybe accepted that that's the way it's going to be called.
All right. Well, speaking of accepting, I'm going to accept the second question of the birthday game. So
this person, baseball, 65 years old today, 20 years as a player, all with one team, Hall of Fame, was an infielder, born in California, and is still involved with the team that he played for, albeit not directly.
Oh, Jesus.
Think about it. Played from 77 to 96, all with one team. Infielder. Even managed the team he played for. I'll give you that one. He even managed the team he played for.
Oh, good Lord. Oh, I'm honestly drawing a blank. I was going to throw
wow.
Yeah, I really am. I'm drawing a blank. I'm just going to have to pass and wait for the gimme.
Wow.
I'm literally drawing a blank here.
Okay.
I am. So,
fair enough.
All right. With that, let's get to the meat of the podcast. We'll talk a little bit of Detroit sports here. And we'll start with the Tigers since they are at spring training, and we're getting as Bob Page mentioned, all the fluffy articles coming out now about guys. Well, we haven't seen the so-and-so's in the best shape of his life headline yet, but it's early in spring training. But there was two bits of news really that come out of the first week. It was more coming from the front office. One that the GM / president of baseball operations, Scott Harris, spoke to the media about what he expects this season. And also late today, actually, apparently, owner Chris Ilitch spoke to the players and had a team meeting and said some interesting things. And we'll start with what Ilitch said, because Ilitch has been catching a lot of crap lately, and most of it deserved, about the team really, about the failed rebuild and not spending, being in the lower half of the league when it comes to team salary, and it doesn't seem like a passion project the way it was for his father. But Ilitch reported, this is all coming from the players, Greg. Ilitch didn't speak to the media at all, so it was just the players kind of relaying what he said. But after Ilitch himself didn't speak, but after a meeting with the Tigers players, the players said that Ilitch has invested in a new team plane. He is revamping the team clubhouse at Comerica Park. And the money quote being, he's trying to improve every aspect of being a Tiger. According to Matthew Boyd, this is what Ilitch had to say. Ilitch said Scott Harris is trying to build a first-class organization, and quote, Chris Ilitch supports it. And it's also interesting, I don't know if you caught this either, this was earlier in the week, that the Tigers are actually investing in their minor leagues, in that They're going to have a minor league nutrition coordinator for the first time ever this year. They will also have a nutritionist and 2 athletic trainers at each affiliate level, which that's the one that gets me, is that for this is for years, teams have essentially nickeled and dimed their minor league organizations to the point where, the players were making poverty wages and having to live on it over a summer. It was ridiculous. And all of a sudden, I would hope that that Scott Harris is the one that's bringing all this with him, coming from a very successful organization. Well, two, being with the Cubs and then the Giants, they're, and both those organizations have won playoff games, World Series, and so on. So it's good to see that he's investing in the infrastructure of the organization. They've new general manager who has been given carte blanche to do what he wants when it comes to player development, how the organization is run on analytics and all that kind of thing. And now we're starting to see it in the minor leagues of investing in the players down there. So, if anything comes out of spring training, I think this might be the best news of all.
This is the kind of news that you kind of receive with mixed emotions, because on the one hand,
why weren't they doing this before?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. On the one hand, you're glad that they're finally doing it. On the other hand, it's like what you just said, is like, what took so long? Mm-hmm. How many years were wasted? Why was it so difficult for them to catch on, and so forth? And these are, but there's nothing to do but look forward. I mean, you can't exactly. You and I could sit here and talk about what went on in the past until we're blue in the face. It doesn't matter. What matters now is going forward. But what is, to me, what's becoming, we talked a little bit a couple of weeks ago about that Keith Law, the minor league system and so forth, and about their development of players or lack thereof, and we said, gosh, this is just crystallizing the shambles they became under Al Avila, and how many years were wasted with Al Avila. And in retrospect, not that neither of us were ever on the really, really heavy on the Al Avila train to begin with, but I guess I didn't realize that he was essentially fiddling while Rome was burning. Avila. The condition that everything is in right now is really, an indictment of his tenure. Now, having said all that, Harris is one thing that he said. Scott Harris said, I thought was it's kind of getting a little bit of scorn on social media. Is he said, our goal this year is to play competitive baseball for as long as we can.
Right.
And it's like, wow, that sounds like throwing in the towel before. Now, don't get me wrong. We all know that the team is bad. I'm not going to sit here and try to tell you the team's not bad. Okay. And I get that. For families to be told that we're just going to try to hang in there for as long as we can, be competitive for as long as we can. And then after that, the wheels are going to come off. The wheels are going to come off. Kind of thing. And I don't know what he meant by that necessarily. I think he was trying to, I think he thought that was a strong statement. I don't think it was received as such. I think the fans received that as kind of self-defeating. I mean, I'm not expecting Scott Harris to come out there in Lakeland the first week of spring training and say, we're going to win the World Series. Our goal is to win it. Although it really should say that. I mean, that really should be the goal.
Right.
But the fact that he said, we're going to try to be competitive for as long as we can. Even if it just said, we're going to play competitive baseball, and just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But to say we're going to play competitive baseball for as long as we can this year, what does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And then he adds, we're going to start there and build on that. So that's not exactly the most encouraging statement from the man who's running your organization. But then again, he literally walked into a house of fire, I think, and has spent most of the offseason putting fires out rather than trying to rebuild the damn organization for the most part. So, but that's a very waving the white flag kind of a statement in a way. it's very, there's a lot different than when Sparky Anderson got hired and said, we're going to win in 5 years. We're going to win the World Series in 5 years. Of course, he admitted well after the fact that he said that because that's as long as his contract was.
Right.
So, so there's the caveat to it. But yeah, there was, that's a far more inspiring thing to say than say, we're going to try and play competitive baseball. That's well, what? Okay. No, it kind of feels like the Lions. We want to play. We want to be playing important games in December. That's what it feels like.
If Al Avila said that,
yeah.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? Oh my God. If he had said that. Now, obviously, there's we're in the honeymoon period with Harris. That's true. Yeah, he can pretty much say what he probably could have said whatever he wanted. Nothing really is going to get a lot of backlash. But I just thought that was a curious thing to say. Here's the thing too, though. These guys like Harris, and I'm all for the younger. I've always been pushing for the younger, the brighter guys. I get that. One thing you have to understand though about some of these guys, about these younger guys who've kind of been like waiting in the wings, if you will. I mean, they've had really good jobs with other organizations, and they've made their mark, and that's why they got the job, because they had their mark. But one thing that and I come from a communications background. I come from a place where I've been involved with media training for executives and things where you literally teach them how to present themselves to the media. And these younger guys like Harris, this is the first time they've really been where all the microphones have been in their face.
Right.
Not that they've never done interviews before. I'm not suggesting that. But he's going down there now as the guy. I mean, the boss of the Tigers. I mean, there's nobody else to talk to. Once you get done with talking to Hinch, he's the next guy you're going to talk to. So as soon as he shows up, Harris, and shows his face, all the media is going to flock to him. So now this is his first time really being that guy. And now it's different from being Theo Epstein's assistant in Chicago. It's different than being, the guys that guy's assistant. I can't remember his name. Assistant in San Francisco. Now you are the guy, and you're 38 years old, however old he is, and now you've got to be the one who's going to handle all these questions. And so I got to give him a little grace. He's going to maybe say some things that will make you scratch your head a little bit. You mentioned a little bit a while ago. You said, "Boy, Harris is really good at talking a lot and not saying a lot." And maybe that's just part of his, he's trying to find his way as a media person, because he has nobody. There's nobody else you're going to talk to. You're not going to talk to. Who cares what Chris Ilitch has to say anyway? You're not going to talk to him. You talk to Hinch every day, so that's not a big deal. Harris now, and once the regular season begins, I don't know how available he's going to be, and how he, how vocal he'll be, or how much of a media darling he's going to be, Harris, once the season gets going. But right now, he's showing up to his first spring training, and this is his first time doing this job. And so it's also his first time talking to the media while doing this job. And so he's going to maybe say some things that makes you think, that's strange. Maybe these are the things he would have said. This sounds like stuff he would say privately, like to his own lieutenants. It was a strange thing to say to the media, who's now going to, now everybody's hearing, now everybody knows what he said. And so I thought it was now, of course, we're going to forget about all this stuff down the line. We're not, but those are the kind of things, though. Those are the kind of quotes, Al, that can kind of follow you a little bit, and not in a good way. I mean, you can get chided for that kind of stuff. We might be in June, or not even June, May 10th, and the team is 6-19, and we're already going to be saying, well, gee, Scott, I guess that competitive baseball is done. I guess you said we're going to play competitive baseball for as long as we can. I guess that's over with, huh? That's the kind of stuff they can get thrown back in your face. But again, he's in a honeymoon period. He can say whatever he wants now, and it's not like his job is in jeopardy. So he can do whatever he wants, say whatever he wants. I just thought that was a strange thing to say.
Oh yeah, it's very. He's coming across as a Dave Dombrowski light so far. Because we remember Dave Dombrowski kind of learned his lesson about being outspoken when he made that comment 20 years ago about trying to trade. You try and trade Bobby Higginson, at was it Detroit Athletic Club, and
Right.
and then he never made that mistake ever again. While Al Avila never seemed to learn it. Period. Where he was like just throwing all kinds of shit out there. Oh, this is what we're going to do. This is what And then when those things don't happen, you're going to get called out on them. That happens constantly with them. I found another interesting thing that Harris said was, and this was something that I think upset a lot of the fan base, in that the Tigers did not sign a single free agent position player to a Major League Baseball contract. All the most of the veterans they brought in were all on minor league deals or spring training invitee. They were invited to camp. None of them have a guaranteed big league contract. The guy, the Cesar Hernandez's and things like that they brought in. So, and this is what he had to say. It's really tough to find young, controllable position players this is the money line, at a reasonable acquisition cost. Now, I think he thought he was going to be able to do more this offseason until he saw what the market was. Then he added, I didn't think it made sense for us to invest significant at-bats in veteran players who will not be part of this team beyond 2023. Good. Then don't play Miguel Cabrera very much for starters. That's just, that's a great line, but I do not want to see Miguel Cabrera get 400 at-bats. Or even 300 for that matter. I don't want to see them, bringing up that 31-year-old Danny Sands and seeing him get 250 at bats. That was the catcher that Bob was talking about. If this is the sort of thing that, if you say you're going to give all your young players the at bats, then they better give the players the at bats. And
but I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago. He's making these very low level moves. He's bringing in, I compared it to when Jimmy Devellano, back when he first took over the Red Wings, Jimmy would bring in these either veteran guys or these young kids and just try to on the cheap and just try to patch together a roster while he waited for his draft his scouts and everybody to do the draft magic,
right,
and wait for those players to develop, which worked eventually. And so the first few years of the Red Wings under Devellano were just a patchwork, and none of those players, very few of those players were going to be with the team when the team saw any success whatsoever.
Right.
And Harris is kind of doing the same thing. A lot of low, a lot of guys nobody's ever heard of, grabbing bargain basement people, and he's just trying to formulate some sort of a roster right now. But really it's going to come down to that's what's so scary about this, is that you mentioned throwing the kids out there, and I agree with you. But if these kids aren't anything to write home about, then with that organization, that feeder system in the condition that Keith Law says that it's in, if these kids that are on the verge of being big leaguers or are big leaguers right now, they don't pan out, this is going to get really ugly. This is going to get even uglier than we think. This is going to be that first wave, like in the mid 70s, when they brought the first wave of young players up that didn't work out, until they brought the second wave of young players up, which ended up being the core of the 84 team. But that first wave they brought up was really scary. And I hope that doesn't happen again, because you mentioned those 4A players that they kept like a yo-yo up and down to Toledo. But if this set of people that they've got now, the Kreilers and the Colt Keiths and the Parker Meadows and guys like that, if they don't pan out with
that's something you don't want to think about. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, they also brought up, there are some useful free agents still out there. The Jurickson Profars, Gary Sanchez, Luke Voigt, a few others who would actually fill a position of need. Of a third baseman, some outfielders, and things like that. Yeah. And Harris said, "We are always looking. There aren't any glaring areas of concern I would focus on right now. Obviously, ignoring third base completely. Yeah, right. But we're constantly looking, which I would say that's a long way of saying no.
Right. Yeah.
Unless something drastically horrible happens, what you see in camp is what you're going to get. And okay, so be it. Then. But then I don't want to hear this team whining about the third base production when they didn't get a third baseman in the offseason. Or if you're going to go the way they are, throw everything at the wall at the position of third base and second base, some of these other positions, and see what the hell happens. Because this is a lost season, despite we're going to try and play competitive baseball as long as we can. Normally that's what, till March, maybe, April, end of April usually. So, at this point, I would love Harris and Hinch just to throw specifically the position players. Throw everything you got at the wall, see what you got, and then at least you know what your foundation is. Because as you said, maybe Torkelson doesn't pan out, but maybe Parker Meadows does. Maybe Ryan Green just turns out to be an average major league ball player. Maybe Cole Keat turns into a slugger. Now's the time to find out in a season with no expectations.
You know what's funny though, Al, about free agency in baseball right now? It seems like gone are the days. I mean, it seems like right now the free agents are either those kind of bargain basement signings.
Yeah, they're either getting major league minimum or they're getting 11 years at $300 million.
Yes.
Yeah. There's no middle class anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's what's missing right now. There's not that 4-year contract at $15 million a year anymore.
Right.
Those kind of players either don't exist anymore,
or
there's just not a market for that anymore. It's either swing big for the fences with what you said about the 11 years and $300 million, or the 1-year deals, $2 million, the one-offs for $2 or $3 million a pop.
Yeah.
Those mid-range deals anymore. For what those players, I don't know do they not exist?
Hell, you could argue that Rodriguez and Baez got that kind of a deal because they're short term. Because they're 5-6 years of opt outs. And I think that might be the new middle class is guys who get opt outs in their deals. Like Manny Machado's already announced he's opting out of his $300 million contract. Expecting he can get more. I don't blame him considering what the market did this last offseason.
Right. Well, and that's why I didn't trust for a second when Correa signed with the Twins. I didn't trust that for a second.
Right.
And he initially said, "Oh, I want to stay here. I'm going to be a Twin." I'm like, you're not going to stay with the Twins. Are you kidding me? You're too big for Minnesota. Way too big. And both in terms of finances and in terms of the kind of player you are. And indeed he did. He did indeed opt out, and he's gone. I mean, he's with the Rangers now.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that Eduardo Rodriguez's deal that he signed last year, and it didn't work out too well last year because of his personal problems.
Yeah.
But if he has a typical year for him, 3.5 something ERA, throws 200 innings, and he's going to make a shit ton of cash. He's going to opt out because look at the pitchers got this past offseason. He got some ridiculous contracts out there. So it's so if I could easily see Rodriguez opting out, especially even if he throws 170 innings, he's gone, and 170 above average innings, he's gone. But I could easily see Baez staying because he's going to be a 30-year-old middle infielder who goes fishing all the time, and they're going to be stuck. They're going to be hung in that contract for another 4 years. But regardless of all that, you're right though. There's no middle class anymore in Major League Baseball. It's it really has become haves and have-nots when it becomes a free agency, and and a lot of it has played into because of how no one's trading prospects for the most part anymore. They're all concerned about service time and keeping these players as long as they can until they hit free agency. Oftentimes you'll see teams like the Braves have become great at this, where they sign guys they know they want to keep. They sign them to relatively big money, but not max money, and they buy out some of their free agency years, so they get off a little cheaper while the players gets a significant amount of security while losing some, not being able to reach free agency to like 32 or 33 rather than at 28. So, there are things to do out there, but yeah, the market's completely different than free agency was even 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, where you'd see guys get 2, 3, 4-year deals for $5 to $10 million a year. Those guys have disappeared. It's something how baseball has changed.
Yeah, and I misspoke on Korea. He did stay with the Twins.
Yeah.
I misspoke on that one. I thought
But
that he
but
was
not for a lack of trying.
no, right. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, it just seems like that. And you're right about the opt out. That seems to be the new thing now.
Yeah.
Maybe that is kind of taking the place of those mid range
Mm-hmm.
contracts. So it is. But here's the thing though. I mean, at what point somebody said it on Twitter too. Al, one of the people
Mm-hmm.
I follow on Twitter, they say when is it the right time? Owners love to talk, GMs love to talk about when it's not the right time to spend
Right.
money. It's not the right time. When is it ever? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
when is it's fair to ask? Okay, when is it the right time to spend money? Then, I mean, the Tigers. I know that's 20 years ago, but they
Yep.
signed Pudge Rodriguez coming off 119 losses, and I know that Pudge had very few suitors. I understand that.
Yeah. And the Tigers overpaid. Exactly.
Right. But they went out and they signed. They tried. They signed Rodriguez. They signed the guy that always got hurt, Fernando Vina. They signed
Vina. He ended up barely playing at all. But
it was they signed that outfielder too.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I can't remember his name now. But they went out and signed like 3 or 4 guys.
Yeah.
Some I mean, and they were coming off 119 loss season.
Yeah.
So when is it ever the right time to spend? When is it the right time?
Yeah, going by that logic, the Tigers never should have signed Pudge Rodriguez or Manley Ordonez.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So when is it the right time to spend money?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Honestly, we've had this discussion that the time to spend money is when other teams aren't. You zig when they zag, that kind of thing. So, or you look for weaknesses in the market and know what that weakness could be is that middle class player. Those guys are out there, but they're continually getting 1-year contracts, like the CJ Crowns of the world, who will give you 30 bombs, drive in 80, will give you an 800 OPS, give you above league average production at first base. Yet he makes barely more than the league minimum. He's probably getting $1 million or $2 million. Making, instead of making $10 million a year, he's probably getting paid $5 million. There's probably guys out there that you could get if you decided to go 2 or 3 years longer rather than trying this 1 year stuff and get some of these guys. And, that's the kind of thing. Who knows if it would work? But I'm just saying that's the kind of thing you got to think about. You look for you look for where the market isn't, and then you go into that. That goes back to the Moneyball era when the A's were the first team to suddenly realize on base percentage makes a hell of a lot of sense. We should just sign guys who get on base. So back then you hit 300, you're an all-star. Didn't matter if your on base percentage was 310. So that's I just hope that Scott Harris is smart enough to see where the market's going and then take advantage of any openings that may be left as the market moves on to a different direction. I guess that's our only hope at this point.
Well, I mean, I know it's not as easy as just snapping your fingers and signing these big name guys for 10, 12 years. And I know that that's not necessarily the most desirable thing either, because
it is risky. It's very risky.
It is. But, on the other hand, and I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, that I looked at the Detroit baseball market is kind of dying on the vine, and that it's withering. And I'm concerned about the fans that they're hemorrhaging and so forth. And sometimes you got to do something really, really bold. Now the problem is that there's not. I don't think after this season, I'll have to double check the free agent tracker. I don't think there's a lot of those guys available, at those kind of big names available after the season either. I know there weren't after 2022, and I don't think there's after 2023 either. I think starting in 2024, you might see some guys that are available. But
like I said, a lot of these guys are getting locked up early. If Riley Green has a big couple years, lock him up right away and buy away some of that free agent.
Now there's some. I read today where Shohei Ohtani, is making noises, about wanting to test the free agent.
Would you blame him? He's a $500 million player. He is a $500 million player if there ever was one.
Now, that I don't know. I'm probably just completely off base here, but if a team like the Tigers ever made a move like that, you would get this town so jazzed up again for baseball with one signing with the pen, one signature, one signature. You would get this entire town excited again immediately, and you would bring back a lot of fans. You would that Comerica Park would have 35,000 fannies in the seats again, like it used to be in the good old days. And I mean, now will they do that? Probably not.
No.
But my gosh, I mean, if the benefits of a guy like that, is there risk? Of course there are. Of course there's risk. Of course. But sometimes, you gotta do. I'll tell you this: if Mike Ilitch were alive, he would entertain it.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, he definitely. I agree.
Absolutely would entertain that. Yeah. And I used to think it was unfair, and it is unfair to compare sons to their fathers. It really is, because even though they come from the same bloodline, they're still two different human beings, and they're driven by two different things. Mike Ilitch was driven by his own. In his way, and Chris Ilitch is driven in his way. Okay, fine. So I still believe that there is merit to saying, you really shouldn't compare father to son, even though it's tempting to do that.
Right.
But at what point does the son say to himself? At what point? I think it's also fair to say, gee, Chris, I don't think you've got the same. And it's not necessarily even a criticism, but just I don't think you've got the same chutzpah that your dad had. Okay, when it comes to this whole owning a sports team.
Yeah, he's the second generation. What does they always say? The first generation makes the money, and when it comes to this kind of serious money, first generation makes it. The second generation maintains it. The third generation blows.
At what point? Okay, at what point does he say? At what point does Chris Ilitch say? Now he's.
Well, maybe this is the point, because that was a very embarrassing season last year.
Theoretically, you are, when you're the owner of a team, even if you're the owner for tens of years, dozens of years, theoretically, you are the steward of that franchise. You may be the owner at the time. You may be the current owner, but you are eventually somebody else is going to own it eventually, whether it's you or your family or somebody else other than you is going to own that team. You can't live forever. You're going to eventually die, and somebody else is going to own the team. At what point does Chris Ilitch say to himself? And this is where I think that the criticism is valid of his being different. At what point does he say to himself, you know what? What would my dad want?
Yeah.
What would my dad do? What would my dad? I mean, at what point do you take what? I mean, he was there next to his father all those years. At what point do you say to yourself, Dad, what would you do? Would you make a move for Ohtani? I'm using him as an example.
Yeah.
Would you, at what point does Chris Ilitch say, what would my dad want?
Yeah.
For this franchise? Because I'm not suggesting that you become your dad, but at what point do you say, geez, this team is an embarrassment right now? And the fans are pissed, and things are not going well. And so I need to do something really, really bold here to really, it may not work. It may not work at all. But if at what point does Chris Ilitch say, we're going to just roll the dice?
Yep.
I think what's scary to a lot of people, Al, and what's scary to me is I don't think he has that in him.
Probably not.
And that's what's scary.
Yeah.
That's what's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. I think and he comes across like that in interviews. When the few times he does show up in the media, he doesn't come across that this is not his passion project the way it was with his father. Because, if we had mid-2000s Mike Ilitch still running this team, Manny Machado or Carlos Correa is probably playing shortstop right now, amongst other things. So, and he was not afraid to take risk. Essentially trading all your top prospects for Miguel Cabrera. I mean, that was it was an educated risk and one that it was a good risk, but it was still a risk. It still could have blown up, because they gave up at the time. I think the two top 10 of all the Major League Baseball prospects, and was it in Maben and oh God, who was the pitcher? God damn it! You know what I mean though. But
Zimmerman?
What's that? I'm sorry.
Are you talking Zimmerman?
What when the two prospects they traded for Cabrera was Maben
and the signing. Andrew
Miller. Yeah, they were like top 5 prospects in Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
Teams don't do that today. And but then again, guys like Miguel Cabrera don't become available for trade the way he was he was 25 years old at the time, something like that. That looking back at it, just how dumb the Marlins were to do that. But it took Ilitch. I still think that the 2003 season was the wake up call for Mike Ilitch, because that was an embarrassment of a year, 119 losses. And be honest, he had been a crappy owner to that point. Going all the way back to the debacle that was closing Tiger Stadium and trying to get Comerica built. Remember John McHale? That was the only reason he was working for the Tigers, was to get that goddamn stadium built. And so they let Tiger Stadium get absolutely decrepit. They didn't put any money at all into that. The Tigers in the 90s were a bad organization. Up until the early 2000s, they were a bad organization.
Right.
And it took that. I think it took that 2003 season to wake Mike Ilitch up to. If this is going to turn into something, I have to be more proactive, start spending money, and get good people in. And obviously, he got Dave Dombrowski in, and the rest is history. And that was the best stretch of baseball. Sustained stretch of baseball we've had in probably our lifetimes, Greg. Now, say what you will about the 80s. Team, I still to this day see that team underachieved. It really did. They should have won more than one World Series or won more than one pennant. Because we've never had a stretch like we did. The early teens where they went they won the division 4 straight times. Made it to the Worlds. And it's all. And I'm not going to give any grief for not winning the World Series, because it's so much luck involved. If Miguel Cabrera doesn't tear up his groin in 2013, the Tigers win the World Series. He was playing on one leg at the end of that year, and that cost the Tigers. But in the end, I think you're right about Chris Ilitch. This is not his passion project. He's just trying to maintain what his father did, but he's going to try and do it. He's not going to go above and beyond like his father. Mike Ilitch was not afraid of the luxury tax. He was not afraid of pissing off other owners by spending money. And I think Chris Ilitch really wants the status quo. I want to be middle of the pack, maybe make the playoffs, at least maybe not, but we'll be competitive. But with Chris Ilitch, I just get the feeling that the end game of him is to not win the World Series. The end game with him is to maintain the value of the franchise.
But you know what? You can do both, can't you? Can't you do both at the same time? I don't think.
But I think there has to be a passion to do it, and I think you're right when it's not there of him.
Yeah, and again, I've resisted. I've resisted. To me, the low hanging fruit was always to just play that card. To say, "Oh, Chris Ilitch is not like his dad," and a lot of folks. You hit on something. I'm glad you said it, by the way, about the Tigers of the 90s. Yeah. People forget. They tend to, as they romanticize Mike Ilitch, and especially after his death.
Yeah,
they tend to have amnesia about what happened between when he bought the team in '92.
Yep,
and your thing about 2003, that 11-year period, and you're absolutely right, was just complete chaos. That organization went through.
The firing Ernie Harwell, and Ernie Harwell sandbagging him in the press conference, and it was horrible. And Sparky Anderson, how he was hitting his career scandal. It was awful. He was essentially blackballed by the Ilitches.
So many things went wrong
Yep.
under the Ilitch ownership the first 10 years that he owned the team.
Yeah.
Now things were going. Now a lot of that was kind of it was kind of shoved to the side because the Red Wings were. That was the time the Red Wings.
The Red Wings were
ascending.
smoking hot.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
They were ascending
Yep.
to becoming a powerhouse organization themselves. So
Mhm.
that Tiger thing kind of got. It
Yeah.
wasn't as big of a deal. It seemed
Right.
like, and
plus, 1984 wasn't that long ago at that point when you think about
right,
it. Yeah.
right. So, but you're. I'm glad you brought those years up because they should not be forgotten. And I'm not going to give Mike Ilitch a free pass and say he was the greatest owner since sliced bread, but he did. You're right. He did finally figure it out.
Yeah.
Obviously, Dombrowski was the key, just like hiring Jimmy Devellano was the key.
Right.
He got that one right away. That was his first hire with the Red Wings. He got that one right away. The Dombrowski thing took about 9 years for him to figure that one out. But when he brought Dombrowski in, you're absolutely right. It took a couple of years, of course, but Dombrowski was the one who got the things rolling. But you're right. There was a long time there where the Tigers were. You're right, a bad organization playing in what you correctly described as a decrepit, neglected ballpark. And you're absolutely right about John McHale. For folks who don't know, Google John McHale. Now, there's two John McHales. There was a father and a son. We're talking about the son who was brought in to do exactly what you said, which was to close Tiger Stadium and open Comerica Park.
Right.
And then
it wasn't to run the team or anything. It was to get that stadium built. That's all.
The Randy Smith debacle.
Yep.
I mean, there were a lot of things that went wrong in the 90s. A lot of things went wrong in the 90s. And but the folks who romanticize about Mike Ilitch seem to think that his ownership started
in 2004.
Right, and it didn't.
Yeah.
But eventually he got it right.
And to his credit, he did. And we had a wonderful decade of baseball. It really was. It was fun. It was fun to watch. It was fun to talk about.
Yeah.
And the off season were fun because they were actually in on free agency. They were making big trades. They were being creative in how they built the team. They were finding diamonds in the rough. The Carlos Guillens and Placido Polancos of the world who became very productive players that they got for pennies on the dollar. And I miss that. I really, really miss that. I hate the Tigers being irrelevant. But as we've mentioned on this podcast in the past, for the vast majority of our adult lives, Greg, the Tigers have been irrelevant for the most part, except for brief periods where they've been good, like the late 60s, mid 80s, and then that 2006 to 2014. That's been it. The rest of the time they've been bad. It's been bad. They've been a bad team. So it's very frustrating. Very frustrating.
And not only bad, but historically bad. I mean, I think I counted one time. They've lost 100 games in our lifetime. They've lost 100 games like 7 or 8 times.
Yeah. If you talk about some of the worst teams in the history of baseball, you got the 75 Tigers and the 2003 Tigers. And you could make an argument that the Tiger, one of the Avila year Tigers could probably make it as well. You look at, and I know I've brought up the Cardinals so many times. People are probably sick of this by now, but I'm sorry. Yeah. The Cardinals are a mid-market team. They play at, St. Louis, which is granted a great baseball city, but they're not the Dodgers. They're not the Mets. They're not the Yankees. And yet you look at the Cardinals history. They never one of the worst teams in baseball. Never, ever. Right. They may not always be very good, but they never bottom out. And they don't tank. Yes.
No, you have to go back to the late 70s to find the last really bad Cardinals team.
Yep.
All the teams since then are either right in the thick of it.
Yep.
Or they might win 84 games one year. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
But they never lose 110, 117, 119, 108 like the Tigers have done many times.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to hear the word tank again. I'm tired of teams tanking in this town.
So it can be done. They're a very well run organization. Obviously.
That's the difference. Exactly.
But you know what? You're right. It is baseball in this town has been largely bad, mostly bad. and will continue to be bad for the next several years, barring something completely unforeseen,
Right.
is going to be very, very bad again.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the fix is. Hopefully Harris has got the key.
Yeah.
Hopefully Harris is the new Dombrowski, and he's going to figure it all out. And 5 years from now, we'll all be, praising his name.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. How bad the Tigers are that Green and Torkelson could make an all-star team, and this team would still finish under 500. That's how bad they are overall. But again, at this point, all we can hope for is that some of the draft picks from the previous regime actually turn out to be legit star ball players and not just league average guys, and go from there.
Here's what those teams like the Cardinals are just one of them. There are several teams that are really, really good, consistently good. The Rays and some other ones. Okay.
Yeah.
What those teams don't do, is they don't put all their eggs in one basket. Now the Tigers right now are putting all their eggs in the Riley Green Torkelson basket. Seems like.
Yeah, and before that, it was just on the starting pitchers.
Right.
Yeah.
Putting all their eggs in this Riley Green Torkelson duo. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because of where they were drafted. Okay.
Right.
And if these kids end up just being one or two WAR players, okay,
mm-hmm.
and not much more than that,
they're screwed.
Right. But what I'm saying is the other teams that I'm talking about, the ones that are always winning 85 to 95 games, don't do that. Yeah. You never hear about these Cardinals teams with these rookies that they're putting all their faith in. Yeah. No, they don't do that. They don't do that because the teams that are consistently good spread the wealth when it comes to their minor league system, when it comes to their international feeder program and so forth. They don't just look at two guys and say, this is our future. And we're going to put all the chips on Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson and let it ride and see what happens. That's not the key to success.
Right. And it's because when you think about it, think of the team, the Tigers teams that won those 4 consecutive divisions and were competitive from 2006 to 2015.
One of the worst divisions of baseball, too, by the way.
But even still, the majority of that team was not homegrown players.
Right.
Vast, but they hit a home run on a couple. Verlander, Curtis Granderson, maybe a couple other guys. Yeah. But the vast majority of those teams were either you got them in trades, you signed them in free agency, or they're guys you just they were diamonds in the rough that you picked up via minor league deals or off the waiver wire, like the J.D. Martinez's of the world. And so you completely build around the draft in baseball is a fool's errand. And we've learned that because it rarely works. No, they kept telling us, that's how the Astros and Cubs did it. They're the outliers. Otherwise, there wouldn't be the Tigers and Pirates out there right now doing the same thing over and over for the past 10 years. So it's getting frustrating. But all right, with that, we got to move on to the Pistons, Greg, since we pretty much touched on all our Wings topics with Bob and his opinions on the Wings. What happened with the Pistons, Greg, is that there was a trade. The trade deadline was like a day or two after our last podcast.
Yeah.
And we were talking on that show about, could it be a quiet trade deadline? Because there was talk that they didn't want to trade Bogdanovic and they didn't want to, they didn't want to trade Burke. And, there was talk that maybe Sadiq Bey was available. Well, apparently Sadiq Bey was available because that was their big trade deadline move. The Pistons elected to move on from Sadiq Bey and Kevin Knox, another one of those reclamation projects, in a convoluted 4-team trade. And it seems like, Greg, every NBA trade is convoluted at this point.
Yes,
with hundreds of second-round draft picks usually involved. But in the end, the Pistons traded Sadiq Bey ended up in Atlanta. Knox ended up in Portland, and the Pistons ended up getting James Wiseman, the second overall pick, I believe, in the 2020 draft. He's now 21. He is another center. We all know how Troy Weaver loves his centers. But this is a guy, because look at the center room. They have Jalen Duren, who's 19. and has played more basketball this season alone
Right.
than Wiseman has in like the last 3-4 years because of what happened to him in college and with the Warriors. And they also have Marvin Bagley, who was last year's reclamation project, and they gave him a 3-year deal, and he's been hurt most of this year. And then they got Nerlens Noel, who isn't playing at all, so it's probably waiting for a buyout at this point. And obviously, Beef Stew, Isaiah Stewart, who is essentially the starting power forward at this point. But that's their big man right now. And then they bring in Wiseman, who has this is another low floor, high ceiling reclamation project for Troy Weaver. And there is reports, Greg, that Weaver had him as the top player on his 2020 draft board. So, given the opportunity and the idea that I think Saddiq Bey is what he is, and he it was maxed out of what he was going to be, and I don't think they wanted to pay him the money that would have cost to keep him for the production they were likely going to get from him. They decided we're not going to sign him anyway to a second contract. Let's get a guy I really want, so they traded for Wiseman. And I can understand the thought process behind him, but again, this is a risky move because Wiseman is so raw. It's he's so raw. It's like buying a damn it's like buying a steak at the grocery store. It hasn't been cooked yet. That's how raw this kid is. So I hope Weaver's bound to hit him one of these guys one of these times, but so far, none of these reclamation projects he's signed has really done anything. Hope maybe Wiseman will be the that needle in the haystack that does prove to be a valuable basketball player. But who knows at this point?
They went from being low on bigs to just nothing but bigs.
Yeah.
Obviously, Weaver, you mentioned, he had his eyes on Wiseman, and
he loved Wiseman. Apparently,
he had it. Sometimes when you have a guy like that in your crosshairs, you just can't ever get him out of your system, and you almost have to get that guy on your team.
Yeah.
Jack McCloskey was infamous for being big happy as well. He loved big men. Jack just couldn't have enough big men on his team. That's why, and to a fault. That's why
who was that kid from Memphis, if I remember right? That Trader Jack got. I'd have to look that up. Damn it.
Bedford?
Yeah, William Bedford. Exactly. Yeah.
Bedford was one. Nymphius was another one.
Yep.
Nevitz. I mean, he loved these big guys. Okay, fine. And some of them worked out, and some of them did. Bedford famously did not work out.
Right.
But Bedford had issues off the court, of course.
Exactly.
But I mean,
and to Wiseman's credit, they're saying all the good things about him. They're saying there's nothing wrong with him off the court. So
no, right. Hey, I'm not that bummed about losing Bey. I mean, I like Saddiq Bey. I know City Hall probably. I wouldn't talk to City about the trade. I don't know what he thinks, but I know City like Bey. But I'm not all that down about losing Bey. I really am not. I don't think that Bey is the kind of guy that you were going to build around, frankly, anyway, to be honest with you. I mean, he might have been a nice piece on a better team. Maybe if the team was like, he might have been a really good 6th or 7th man on a good team. Not, like a Vinnie Johnson type guy, but for a building team like the Pistons, I don't know that he really took that step forward to really tell me that he was going to be a piece to the puzzle. I don't really mind losing him. I'm not broken up about losing Bey. I mean, I like Bey. Don't get me wrong. I not wish they didn't feel like they had to trade him, but I'm not losing my sleep over losing Bey. I mean, I'm not. Wiseman. I mean, the Pistons have the makings of, in 3 to 4 years, of having a really good team if these kids. I mean, Duran and Ivy and Wiseman, and if Bagley, continues to kind of progress, if Hayes gets it together, Cunningham, you add another lottery pick, which is what they're going to get this year. Another lottery pick is going to come in the mix. 3 to 5 years from now, I know fans want to hear that because that's a long time, but 3 to 5 years from now, this could be the makings of a really good team. Now, what we don't know right now is really the method to the madness here of what Weaver's end game is here. We're not really sure yet what he's really trying to do, other than just live in the past and get guys he wished he got 3 years ago. Now they're talking about this other news that came out just a little while ago. I think since we were doing the program, they're going to, the Pistons are going to sign this kid, RJ Hampton. Apparently.
Yeah, from out of Orlando.
2020 first rounder.
Yep.
Another 2020 first
and another
rounder.
guy who was supposedly high on Weaver's list of that year.
So I'm starting to get a little bit, I'm getting sort of get a creepy feeling about this with all these 2020 first rounders that Weaver's bringing in. Obviously he's got some sort of a fetish for getting these 2020 first rounders that he didn't get by drafting Hayes, but we'll see. It's a work in progress. I guess you really can't. It's like trying to judge the ingredients of a cake when it's halfway through baking. Is it going to be a good cake or not? I don't know.
Yeah,
it's got some good ingredients in it. We'll see what it's like when it comes out of the oven. That's kind of what it's like right now. I feel like the Pistons a lot of these moves, I think, are not going to be this is not the team that's going to go to the NBA playoffs in 3 years, obviously. But they've got pieces on the roster now that could be part of a playoff team in 3 years. It probably will be part of a playoff team in 3 years. But I don't know. There's just a lot of bigs on this team, and we'll just have to see.
Yeah. And I would just say, I would tell fans, don't get attached to anybody.
Right.
Don't get.
Right.
I don't know. You could probably get attached to Jalen Duren at this point. I would, probably Cade Cunningham, even though the jury is still well out on him. But like, if you're a fan of Beef Stew, much as I love his motor, and how much I like his game, he is the kind of player that I can see the Pistons moving on from, much like Sadiq Bey or Killian Hayes could be another guy in there. A few of the guys that they have drafted, look back at the Bad Boys Pistons. You know who I was attached to, Greg? Kelly Tripucka. I loved Kelly Tripucka. But, guess who they got with that trade? They got Adrian Dantley, who was a better fit for the team that they were building. And ultimately, Dantley led to Mark Aguirre, and that led to 2 titles. So, that's, you love guys who, and Bob alluded to this as well when he was talking about baseball earlier. You love guys who come up through the minors, come up through your system, or drafted by your team, and then then they just grow with the team and become stars with the team and stay with the team. Thing is, the only type of players anymore who really get to do that are superstars. And the Pistons don't have that player yet. Maybe it's Cade Cunningham. Maybe it's Duren. Maybe it's the guy they draft this year. Maybe they get lucky and get Wembanyama. Or maybe Scoot Henderson turns into that guy if they end up drafting him. But yeah, this is Weaver's another guy that doesn't have that sunk cost fallacy. If he feels like it's time to move on from a guy, he will move on from a guy. We saw that with Jeremy Grant. So I have no problem with the trade. It's just that I would love to see one of these reclamation projects actually pan out. But when you're talking about 20 and 21-year-old kids, it's really a roll of the dice. And I just hope Weaver's right. And there's not much else you can do.
Right, exactly. And but sooner or later, you're going to have to decide on who is the core. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And we've been through these false cores before. When
yes,
Casey,
the Andre Drummond era. Remember him and Greg Monroe are going to be twin towers.
Right.
And then Casey, the game changed.
when Dwayne Casey first got here, the core was Griffin, Reggie Jackson, and
Drummond.
Okay. That lasted for a year. Okay. Now, then we thought the core was going to be Bey, Cunningham, and Grant.
Yeah.
Okay. That is 2/3 of those guys are gone. Okay.
Right.
Now who's the core? Well, Cunningham, obviously.
Cunningham, maybe Duren, maybe Ivy.
Right. Looks like Cunningham, Ivy, looks like Duren for sure.
Yeah.
Probably Stewart, although I'm not sure that he's
I have a feeling Stewart's going to ultimately be in that John Sally kind of role, the defense guy who comes off the bench.
Could be.
I mean, but you need a guy like him on your team, but he is not going to be the game-changing guy you need in the starting lineup.
Right.
So.
Right.
But
But
yeah,
all the great teams need guys like that. I mean,
yeah,
you
exactly.
can't. Not anybody can
Yeah,
be an
and
all-star.
I think that finding a guy like Stewart is harder to find than a 3-and-D guy like Bay. I think that's what the
Yeah,
Pistons are thinking.
yeah.
It's harder to find a big man like Stewart with a motor than it is to find an average 3-point shooting wing than Sadiq Bey, who
Right,
plays
and Stewart's
that's
one of the
the
few.
yeah,
Stewart's one of the few guys who plays defense on that team.
exactly.
You know, and
And a team that doesn't play it. So,
right.
but yeah, it's at least it gives us something to talk about for the rest of the season with the Pistons. Otherwise, we'd just be running out the string, So anyway, Greg, it's time to wrap things up. Who is your jerk of the week?
Boy, that's
Yeah, this is so much bad shit.
well. Here's one. Yeah, I know. Here's one for you.
Yeah.
This is. I don't know who to give this to. I guess I give it to the Pac-12. The Pac-12. This is. I'm not sure if you heard about this. The Pac-12 is.
Mhm.
This is so crazy. I have to read this to you.
Yeah.
The Pac-12. Apple has emerged as potential landing spot for the Pac-12 college football TV rights, per the New York Post. Apple TV is going to be potentially the landing spot for the Pac-12 college football TV rights. Now, I don't know if the Pac-12 is just going out of business because half the conference is going to the Big Ten. Yeah. And I don't want anybody to care if anybody watches their games or doesn't. But Apple TV, really?
Yeah.
Apple TV Plus is going to be the flagship for the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was a joke. I thought this was like an Onion article. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can't make Apple the jerk of the week. It's got to be the Pac-12.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're thinking with this move, but now they may not get it. But it says they've emerged as a potential landing spot for the Pac-12.
Yeah,
Apple TV Plus.
Yeah, what it probably comes down to, Greg, is that they're going, well, do we want to be visible or do we want piles of cash? And Apple is probably offering more cash than ESPN or CBS or ABC or NBC or whatever. No, say what you will about the Big Ten. As Bob was railing about the expansion.
Yeah,
I think they were very smart in that all their big games are going to be over-the-air broadcast. They'll be either on Fox, NBC, or CBS. They'll have the noon window. They'll have the 3:30 window, and then they'll have like the 7:30 window. And those will all be on they'll be on antenna, they'll be on cable, they'll be on on streaming. They'll be easy to find. As you said, if the Pac-12 goes to Apple Plus, I mean, maybe streaming's the future. I don't think that future's here yet. Right. And it would literally, Greg, be like just saying, we're going to wipe ourselves off the news map on Saturdays. Everybody's going to be watching, ESPN and the other networks, and it'll be Big Ten and SEC for the most part, with some ACC and Big 12 sprinkled in. I had no idea Apple TV is now the front runner. That is nuts to me. That is crazy. Mm-hmm. All right. My jerk of the week. There were so many things I could go off on. There's the obviously what was going on at New Mexico State.
Oh,
that's an absolute. When did hazing become sexual assault, Greg? When I played sports, know how we hazed? We went out and drank beer. That was essentially, we got together and we bonded over beer, at bonfires. When we were 17 years old. We weren't sodomizing people with a broomstick, apparently.
Oh, God.
But I'm going to go with what happened over All-Star Weekend at the NBA, and Karl Malone being, beatified, essentially. No, he is a Utah Jazz legend, and don't get me going on the Jazz name in Utah. But, if for people who don't know, Karl Malone committed statutory rape on a 13-year-old kid, had a baby with that kid, and then had to be sued for child support, and he was never, ever in that child's life, ever. And Karl Malone is a scumbag in numerous ways. if you're a longtime Piston fan, you remember what he did to Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah.
Where he, I believe it was a 44-stitch gash in Isaiah Thomas's head with an elbow because the previous game that they played, Isaiah Thomas decided to make a point about not being on the dream team and literally taking John Stockton to school by just blowing him out of the court. So in the next game, Karl Malone just said, okay, he elbowed him in the head, knocked him out of the game, and literally blood was everywhere. Karl Malone is a freaking scumbag. Yet, the NBA elected to trot him out several times during All-Star weekend about, this is, NBA history. This is, what he is one of the highest scorers ever. Thank God he never won a goddamn title. I'm so happy that the Pistons in 2004 stopped that super team in the tracks and Malone didn't get his title. But the fact that the NBA would trot out Karl Malone, knowing his horrible, horrible backstory, is just so. And the thing is, though, Greg, there's a generation that didn't know this until they trotted him out, and and then the social media goes, "Oh, there's a guy that raped a 13-year-old," and you got 20-year-olds going, "What?" Yeah. So my jerk of the week is the NBA, and for that matter, the Jazz, for allowing Karl Malone to be the face of the franchise. That is absolutely reprehensible, if you ask me.
Well, and don't forget a couple things about the Jazz. Don't forget, number one, John Stockton turned out to be a wackadoodle.
Yes, he's a conspiracy theorist, an anti-vaxxer. Yeah,
and don't forget that. Don't forget when Magic Johnson played with HIV.
Yeah.
That Karl Malone Karl Malone refuse to take the court, or didn't?
Yep, I believe you are right about that.
He said, "I'm not going to play on the same court as a guy with HIV." I mean, So yeah, he's Malone. I agree with you about not winning a title. Thank God Stockton never won either.
Exactly.
But good call on that one. By the way, I forgot to give you the gimme on the.
Oh, okay. What's the gimme?
Okay, he is one half of the Tigers double play combination.
Oh, good Lord. I would like to say Lou Whitaker. But yes, of course, it's Alan Trammell. That's right. I should have known it because it was in today's papers that Alan Trammell was happy to be celebrating his birthday on the fields at Lakeland. That said, said there was no place he would rather be on his birthday than on a baseball field. So yeah, that's a good one, Greg. That is a very good one. And that was literally a softball, and I whiffed. All right, with that, let's get the hell out of here. So if you want to get out the thank yous and anything else that might be going on.
Sure. Thanks to Bob Page, of course, for giving us his time. And that was a lot of fun. We always look forward to that. You can follow me on Twitter at Greg Gino. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. So follow me on my WordPress Out of Bounds blog. A piece pretty much every week. My recent one was about Mike Nolan coaching the Panthers and about how coaches are just kind of coaches, no matter what. No matter what the situation, that's all they do is they coach. They are just coaches. Greg Popovich is 74, still coaching the horrible San Antonio Spurs. Dwayne Casey's going to be 66, coaching the horrible Detroit Pistons. Why? Because they're coaches. That's
they're wired differently.
That's absolutely wired differently. So check that out. I want to thank my lovely wife Sharon, and thank you, Big Al, for making Tuesday night so gosh darn fun.
Yes, and thank you, Greg, for all the work you do, especially when it comes to getting the guests together. Because our little partnership, I kind of handle the tech side. And absolutely. Greg handles the social media and getting the guests. So that's how we end up with such cool guys as Chris Creighton and Bob Page and guys like that. So thank you, Greg, for the hard work you do. And I'm always surprised. I never know what's going to turn up my email and say, oh, by the way, the email yesterday, hey, Bob, you're going to be on the show. Okay. But as always, I appreciate it. I want to give a shout out to Linda, who started her new gig today. Actually, I got a text from her in the middle of actually about 10 minutes ago while we were talking. She was going to bed. She's going through she loves the new job, but she's switching from midnights to days. She's moved from a 7P to a 7A to a 7A to 7P. So that's kind of rough on her, but she's happy. It's what she wants to do. So thank God that, what do they say? Happy wife, happy life. Same goes with long-term girlfriends. So anyway, if you want to subscribe to the show, we would appreciate it if you do, so you wouldn't miss an episode. We are available at all the usual places: Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Deezer. The kneejerks.net is our homepage. That's where all the show notes, all the links will be. You'll find a link to the social media. You'll find links to Greg's blog. Anything we talk about. Plus, you can download the MP3 straight from there if you want to put it on your device without subscribing. With that, I think it's time to get out of here. So, I think 2 weeks from now, I don't know what the hell we'll have to talk about. Probably it's lots of Tiger stuff, hopefully. And maybe we'll be talking about a Red Wings team, Greg, that's actually in a playoff spot, not just on the playoff bubble. Fingers crossed. Because I think they were winning tonight. Because thank God I didn't spoil the score for Bob, since I had the game on as he was talking. So, yeah. So, yep. Let's see here. Oh, Suter has a hat trick. So things are looking up tonight. So looks like the Wings are going to win again. It is now 3-1 in the third. So with that, let's end on a high note then, with the Wings winning rather than our depressing Tigers talk. So with that, let's get the hell out of here because it's getting late. So until this time 2 weeks from now, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Ciao, Italy. We'll see you in 2 weeks.